Just a few years into our marriage, the student I had once mentored transitioned from someone I supported to being my husband's trusted assistant. Not long after, he purchased a villa, not for her, but for her dog. All because she whimsically declared online, "My dog is my baby. Whoever gives it a home is its daddy." 3 days later, she shared a photo on social media of a man and woman holding a white Samoyed, captioned, "Our little family of 3 Tilda." The man wore a wedding ring identical to mine. I liked the post casually, and it was quickly deleted. Minutes later, my husband, who hadn't been home for half a month, called me yelling, "Is this because your shares were taken back? I've already told you, Jennifer is better at running the company than you are. Are you so bored that you're sending her nasty messages?" In the background, I could faintly hear her delicate sobs. I was confused, and before I could respond, he hung up abruptly. Half an hour later, Jennifer posted again, flaunting the contract for the shares that had just been taken from me, with the caption, "If he loves me, he'll give me everything he has. If not, he won't." At the end, she painstakingly tagged me. I smirked as I took a screenshot for evidence. She doesn't understand that when it comes to interests, love is insignificant. When Mark called shouting at me, I was on the phone with the best lawyer, preparing to file for divorce. Just 2 weeks ago, Mark had taken away my 20% stake in the company, claiming it was due to my illness, to let me rest without worrying about the business. But then he turned around and bought a luxurious villa for Jennifer's dog. The bank card was in my name, so I received the transaction notification, leaving me stunned for a moment. He spent millions without hesitation, yet half a month ago, when I asked him for $5 million to buy a special medicine that could increase my chances of recovery, Mark refused outright, saying, "Lisa, you know the company is struggling. We're barely avoiding layoffs. Where can I get $5 million for special medicine? You'll have to bear with it." Then he grabbed his coat and left, not returning for half a month. From that day on, Jennifer's social media was updated 8 times a day, flaunting her happiness. I looked at my phone, expressionless. Through her posts, I saw Mark in the background with a relaxed, pampering smile. It was clear that Mark had made a home in that villa. They went to IKEA together, buying furniture, bedding, and cushions. My heart grew colder. A month ago, I was diagnosed with a rare disease that prevents any wounds from healing properly, or the bleeding won't stop. The doctor said this coagulation disorder was a complication of the disease. If I bleed too often, I will lose my memory and forget many things. I don't want to forget, so I stayed home, avoiding any accidents. I even lied to Mark, saying my illness might lead to paralysis and I would need his care for the rest of my life. I thought he would respond as he did at our wedding 6 years ago, saying, "Whether in poverty or wealth, in health or sickness, I will always protect you." But his expression was indifferent. He silently smoked cigarette after cigarette on the balcony. In the end, he only said, "Lisa, I won't divorce you, but I need someone to be with me for the rest of my life. And I want to have a child. You can't stop me from being with someone else." The person Mark mentioned was his assistant, Jennifer. Jennifer was a poor student I had sponsored for 5 years. She was always grateful, visiting me during holidays, and kindly calling me Miss Anderson. After graduating, she couldn't find a job, so I reached out to my network and secured a good position for her. When I introduced her to the opportunity, Jennifer sweetly said, "No need, Miss Anderson, I already found a job." She was Mr. Smith's assistant. Right in front of me, she affectionately held Mark's arm, smiling innocently. The smile on my face gradually faded, my gaze slowly shifting to the hand that held my husband's arm. Mark noticed something was wrong and gently pushed her away, explaining, "Lisa, Jennifer just graduated. She doesn't know much. She's still a kid. Don't take it to heart. But this kid intentionally got Mark drunk at the company's annual party and took him to a hotel room. That night, I waited for him at home, sleepless." They spent the night together in the hotel. The next morning, Jennifer called me saying, "Miss Anderson, Mr. Smith got drunk last night. I took him to the hotel. Please come and pick him up." I took a taxi to the hotel, opened the room door, and saw Mark lying shirtless on the bed, hickeys all over his neck. Jennifer feigned innocence, saying, "Miss Anderson, Mr. Smith was drunk last night. He mistook me for you. It's all my fault. I don't blame him." Furious, I slapped her. Mark rushed over to shield her, saying, "Lisa, why are you making a scene? Last night was an accident. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Why hit Jennifer? She's just an assistant." He didn't see the little smile she gave me, the one that was provocative and victorious. I shook my head, trying to clear the chaotic memories. I buried my head in reviewing the evidence I had gathered on my laptop. Over the past 2 years, Mark had been spending money on Jennifer, buying her designer bags, clothes, and skincare products. I had taken screenshots and gathered evidence of every expense. I wondered why Mark didn't hide his relationship with Jennifer from me. Every penny he spent wasn't concealed. A few months ago, when I asked him why, Mark pondered for a moment before saying, "Jennifer is so pure. I don't want her to be the other woman. She's my girlfriend." I suddenly laughed, asking him, "What about me? We've been married for 6 years. What do I mean to you?" Mark looked at me with a pitying gaze, so heartless it was almost unbearable. "Lisa, you're sick. You can't be with me for the rest of my life. I know you love me and wouldn't want to see me end up alone. You'd want to see someone love me, right?" At that moment, I understood. Some men are destined to be heartless. After Mark bought the villa for Jennifer's dog, I decided to get a divorce. I transferred as much of the money and assets in my name as possible, some to my mother, some to my best friend. Even if something happened to me, I wanted them to live well. After organizing the divorce evidence, I drove to the company. The receptionist was surprised to see me, raising an eyebrow and smiling. "Mrs. Smith, what brings you here? Long time no see." Usually when Mark's company had issues, I would come to help strategize and get him through tough times. The veterans in the company all knew that half of the credit for Smith Group's success belonged to me. I smiled. "Where's Mark?" The receptionist glanced inside, her face showing hesitation. "Mr. Smith should still be busy." I stepped forward, intending to go in, but the receptionist hurriedly stopped me. "Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith instructed that no one is allowed to enter. If you have an urgent matter, you can tell me, and I will pass it on for you." I gently tugged at the corner of my mouth, taking out the divorce agreement from my bag. "I'm here to divorce him." As soon as I spoke, the entire office fell silent. The employees looked at me in shock, whispering to each other. The receptionist was so stunned she couldn't close her mouth. Taking advantage of her daze, I walked past her and pushed open Mark's office door. The receptionist's voice came too late. The door was already open. Inside, Jennifer was sitting on Mark's lap, his hands tightly around her waist as they kissed passionately. From outside, I heard gasps and murmurs. "No wonder Mrs. Smith wants a divorce. Mr. Smith is openly cheating in the office. I always suspected something was off with that assistant. She's just a homewrecker, utterly shameless." The people inside turned around slowly upon hearing the commotion. When they saw me at the door, Mark's face immediately darkened. "Lisa, what are you doing here?" With a cold expression, he ordered the curious employees to get back to work. "If anyone continues to watch, go to the finance office to collect your paycheck and leave." Everyone cautiously observed my expression. They thought I had come to catch them in the act or put on a dramatic show, but I no longer cared. Without expression, I handed him the divorce agreement. "Mark, review the terms and see if there's anything you want to add. Let's get divorced today." Mark abruptly looked up at me, stunned. After a moment, he chuckled softly. "Lisa, has your illness fried your brain? Do you know what you are saying? You have a rare disease. After the divorce, you'll have nothing. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I shook my head and laughed coldly. "Mark, I suggest you read the terms first. There's also a prenuptial agreement beneath the divorce agreement. Once you read it, you won't say such things." 6 years ago, when Mark proposed, he voluntarily handed me a prenuptial agreement. It specifically stated that he would remain faithful to me for life. If he cheated or changed his mind, he would leave with nothing, and all the assets would be mine. Over the years, I stayed by his side, never leaving, watching him go from a small employee with nothing to a successful businessman worth millions. It seems he had long forgotten his promise, even completely forgetting about the prenuptial agreement. Upon hearing my words, Mark's expression shifted slightly as he lowered his head to check the documents. He roughly flipped through a few pages, his face turning ashen. Seeing that he had read enough, I spoke calmly. "I consulted with a lawyer. The prenuptial agreement is legally binding. Today, I came for your signature and, by the way, to take back ownership of the company." My words were firm, but Mark's face grew darker and darker. He gave me a deep look, then approached and laughed bitterly. "Lisa, do you really think you can threaten me now? When I wrote that prenuptial agreement, it was just for fun. Do you really think I can hand over such a big company just because of a piece of paper? What a joke!" Mark sneered and raised his hand, tearing the prenuptial agreement to pieces. Furious, I picked up the ashtray on the table and hurled it at him. "Mark, you are truly despicable." He stood there like a ruffian, laughing and not even dodging as the ashtray flew towards him, hitting him squarely on the forehead. Blood started flowing down the side of his face. Jennifer, who had been eavesdropping at the door while holding a cup of tea, rushed towards me when she saw Mark's forehead bleeding. "Lisa, how could you hit him? He must be in so much pain with that cut on his forehead." With a face full of concern, she tried to approach to comfort him, but Mark stopped her. Jennifer glared at me with hatred. "You shrew. Are you crazy for money? Now that you're sick, you can't take care of Mark for life? Why morally bind him? Even if you get divorced, you should leave with nothing." Seeking revenge for Mark, Jennifer picked up the shards of the broken ashtray from the floor and rushed at me. "I'll make you feel Mark's pain too." Seeing the sharp shards about to touch my skin, I realized the danger and hurriedly stepped back. But Jennifer still came at me fiercely, losing her balance and cutting my calf with a shard, instantly drawing blood. My face turned pale as I tried to cover the wound with my hand, but the blood kept flowing and I couldn't stop it. Suddenly, I remembered the doctor's warning. I must avoid any injuries because one of the complications of my rare disease is a blood clotting disorder. If the bleeding doesn't stop, it could be fatal. Panicking, I grabbed tissues from the table and pressed them to the wound, but soon the tissues were soaked with blood. Meanwhile, Jennifer, standing aside, exaggeratedly held her finger, forcing out a few tears. "Mark, my finger is bleeding. What should I do?" Mark's face immediately filled with concern as he lifted her in his arms. "Jennifer, don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital right away." As Mark walked past me, I desperately grabbed his pant leg. "Mark, call an ambulance for me. If the bleeding doesn't stop, I'll die." Mark paused, turned back, and looked at me coldly. "Lisa, are you done? It's just a cut, a little blood. Do you really have to curse yourself with death? Don't think that pulling this stunt will make me agree to divorce you. Dream on." I looked sadly at his retreating figure as he hurriedly carried Jennifer out of the office. Before leaving, she didn't forget to give me a provocative glance. When she had cut her finger, Mark made a big fuss about taking her to the hospital, yet here I was, bleeding profusely, and he completely ignored it. It's true what they say, when love is gone, nothing matters. Even if you hang yourself, he'll think you're swinging. In the end, it was the receptionist who called the ambulance for me. By the time it arrived, I had lost so much blood that I fainted. The young female employees, who had never seen anything like this before, were pale with fear and followed me into the ambulance. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I saw the receptionist with red eyes sitting by my hospital bed. "Mrs. Smith, you're finally awake." My gaze fell on the phone she was holding tightly. It showed dozens of missed calls, all from the contact marked Mr. Smith. I curiously glanced at the IV bag hanging by my bed, filled with bright red blood, and saw that the wound on my calf had stopped bleeding. The receptionist explained, "Mrs. Smith, the doctor said you have a blood clotting disorder. You've been unconscious for a whole day and night. We took turns donating blood to you, and that's how the bleeding finally stopped." As she spoke, she started crying again. "I never expected Mr. Smith to be so heartless. You're so seriously ill, and he hasn't come to see you even once." My brain felt muddled for a moment, and it took me a while to realize who she meant by Mr. Smith. Finally, I remembered she was talking about Mark. The doctor was right. If I lose too much blood, I'll start to forget things, little by little, about the people and events in my life. If that's the case, I need to act quickly to reclaim the company and all the assets. Since Mark won't agree to sign the divorce agreement or leave with nothing, I'll have to take the legal route. Over the years, Mark has spent a lot of our joint marital assets on Jennifer. I intend to reclaim all of it. Even if it was donated, I won't let such an ungrateful person benefit. Just as I was contacting the lawyer, the receptionist suddenly ran over with her phone. "Mrs. Smith, something bad has happened. What happened a few days ago has been posted online, and now everyone is insulting you." I looked up to see a video on a website. It was the scene where I had gone to the company to confront Mark and in a fit of rage threw the ashtray at him. The caption said, "This woman is heartless. Suffering from a serious illness, her husband stays by her side, but she is greedy and insatiable. Not only does she want a divorce, but she also wants him to leave with nothing." The comments below were even more outrageous. I know this woman. She used to be a teacher, but then she probably lost her mind and went into business. I heard she's very cunning. To divorce her husband, she did whatever it took, even sending the student she sponsored to her husband's bed. This woman is terrifying. Whoever marries her is doomed. It was clear that someone had hired bots to smear me. I took screenshots of everything and sent a copy to my lawyer. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days, and on the 3rd day, I advised the receptionist to go rest. She felt sorry for me being alone, but she didn't know I had long been accustomed to it. I remember 2 years ago, on our wedding anniversary, I wore a dress Mark had given me, thinking he would like it. But he looked at me with disgust and pushed me away, saying, "Lisa, do you think you're still in your 20s? Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you for dressing like this? You're the wife of a CEO now. You should look the part. Don't dress so garishly all the time. You embarrass me." Since then, I voluntarily stayed out of the public eye. When the media interviewed Mark, I would hide far away. At first, he would tell reporters that we started the company together from scratch, but gradually, it became all his achievement. I also remember when Mark bought a villa for Jennifer's dog a few days ago. I couldn't help but call him. Before I could say anything, Mark snapped at me. "Lisa, are you trying to get back the 20% company shares again? I've already told you, since you're sick now, just stay home and rest. Don't worry about the company matters. Besides, Jennifer is a professional and can help me handle work issues. Don't try to get the shares back." Every time I think about this, I feel he is heartless. When we started the business together and the company faced difficulties, he got drunk and felt he couldn't go on. I was the one who negotiated, glass after glass, securing opportunities. When we overcame those difficulties and the company finally rebounded, he hugged me excitedly, his eyes red, promising, "Honey, I will never let you suffer like this again. I will make you the most enviable CEO's wife, and you will be happy having whatever you want." But now, I can't even get a divorce. Still, I try to remember these moments with Mark. If I don't, I might forget them completely over time. Lying alone in the hospital room, half asleep, someone opened the door. In the dimly lit room, a familiar figure walked in. His name was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say it as I stared at his face. Until Mark sat beside me and spoke softly, "Lisa, I haven't visited you these past few days because I wanted to punish you. Always talking about divorce. It seems you've really been spoiled. Since you keep thinking about the company matters, I talked to Jennifer today and will give you back the 20% company shares. From now on, you go your way and she goes hers. You're not allowed to bother her or talk about divorce again." I stared at Mark's pretended calm expression at that moment and couldn't help but laugh. How could he still not understand me after 6 years of marriage? "Mark, I think I've made it very clear. I don't want the 20% company shares. I want to take back the entire company. You cheated and you have to leave with nothing. That was your promise." "Why do you insist on getting a divorce?" Mark frowned deeply. "Can you still live as well as you do now after leaving me?" I let out a bitter laugh, hidden in the darkness. The Mark I once knew had long disappeared, replaced by someone unrecognizable. He was now convinced that I wouldn't dare to divorce him, couldn't divorce him, and even believed that I shouldn't divorce him. He thought I was like a parasitic vine, unable to survive without him. What a joke. I'm not afraid of dying, so why would I continue to endure this miserable life just for a bit of comfort? "Divorce is the only option," I said firmly. "Mark, you and I both know our feelings for each other have completely broken down. This is the path you chose yourself." After saying this, I closed my eyes. Mark probably saw that I was unmoved and stubborn. He stared at me silently for a long time. Finally, he left without saying a word. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I called my lawyer and arranged to meet him at a cafe. But before I could leave the hospital, a swarm of media reporters surrounded me. Mrs. Smith, is it true that you and Mr. Smith are getting divorced? Is it true that you're using all means necessary to divorce Mr. Smith and leave him with nothing? Is it true that you allowed a poor student you sponsored to sleep with your husband? Don't you find that disgusting? Microphones were thrust in front of me. Suddenly, I felt dizzy. Please move. I tried to push through the reporters, but they only crowded tighter, giving me no way out. Someone pushed me hard, and I fell to the ground, my hands and knees hitting the pavement. Blood started flowing again, and the dizziness intensified. I could feel hot streams of blood flowing continuously from my hands and knees. There were gasps of horror around me. Blood, so much blood. All I could see was blood. I was drenched in it, as if soaked in a pool of it. Amidst the chaotic sounds of panic around me, some were calling for an ambulance, while others were trying to disperse the crowd. I felt strangely calm, thinking that dying like this wouldn't be so bad. There was just one regret. I hadn't managed to divorce Mark. Even in death, I couldn't be a free, wandering spirit. Suddenly, the crowd parted, and someone was running towards me frantically. "Lisa!" A nearly hoarse voice almost burst my eardrums. I couldn't help but look up, curious to see who was making such a loud noise. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see his face clearly. Mark's face was frantic, his breathing quick. "Why is there so much blood, Lisa? You can't sleep. Wake up!" Someone was furiously pinching my face. I found it very noisy and wanted to push that person away, but I had no strength. My hands were sticky and wouldn't lift. Mark, in a frenzy, picked me up and ran to the hospital. "Lisa, hold on a bit longer. Hold on. We're almost at the hospital." I eventually fell asleep. I had a very long dream. I dreamt of my younger self. Someone bought 999 roses and waited at my door for 3 days and nights. My parents disapproved of him because he was poor and didn't want me to marry him. But I was certain he would treat me well all my life. Then I dreamed of our wedding. There weren't many friends or family at the wedding, but we were still very happy, feeling like we had the whole world just by looking at each other. The scene shifted to after we got married. I had been continuously sponsoring a poor student to go to college. What was her name again? I forgot. She was a nice girl, grateful, and visited me during every holiday. But later, what happened later? I thought I wouldn't wake up this time, but 3 days later, I opened my eyes in the hospital again. Looking at the unfamiliar surroundings, I held my head, trying to remember who I was for a long time. Where am I? Hearing a sound, the man beside me jumped up and quickly ran to my bed. "Lisa, you're awake. I'm sorry, I didn't know you." He rushed over to grab my hand, but I avoided him with a puzzled look. "Who are you?" As soon as I spoke, Mark froze completely, looking at me in disbelief. "What did you say?" I was even more confused, frowning at him. I asked, "Who are you?" I thought to myself. Not only is this person inexplicable, but his hearing is also bad. Mark's eyes turned red, staring blankly at me. "Lisa, I know you're mad at me, but please, don't tease me, okay? I know I've neglected you these days. If it weren't for the media live stream, I wouldn't have known you bled so much. Lisa, I'll be more considerate from now on. I'll spend more time with you." I impatiently covered my ears, not wanting to hear a single word. Who was this person? I didn't know him, and he was being so noisy, it was really annoying. I looked around, and seeing this, Mark immediately asked, "What are you looking for? I'll help you find it." "My phone." After a long search, Mark handed me a phone. "Lisa, here's your phone." I happily took the phone and quickly unlocked the screen, dialing my best friend Olivia's number. "Olivia, I seem to have been hospitalized for some inexplicable reason. Can you come see me? And there's a strange man next to me who keeps bothering me. Please come and help me get rid of him." The more I spoke, the darker Mark's face became. Not long after, Jennifer also arrived. She came over and took Mark's arm. "Mr. Smith, I didn't know you had a blood clotting disorder. I shouldn't have been so impatient that day. I'm sorry, but I did it for Mark because I care so much about him. That's why I lost control. Can you forgive me?" Facing Jennifer's earnest gaze, I shook my head, looking confused. "I don't know you." The two of them were momentarily at a loss. Mark's eyes instantly turned red. He suddenly went crazy, losing control and holding me in his arms. "Lisa, if you want to play, I can play with you. But speak properly, don't scare me." I was so scared by him that I started crying loudly. "What are you doing?" Olivia's voice came from the hallway. She rushed in and hugged me, checking the red marks on my wrists and, enraged, slapped Mark hard. "You beast! You've already hurt Lisa to this extent and still won't let her go." "What exactly do you want?" Mark looked up in shock. "Lisa is my wife. I love her too much to ever harm her." Olivia laughed coldly, pulling out a diagnosis slip from her pocket. "How dare you say Lisa is your wife? When she was diagnosed with a rare disease, why didn't you say she was your wife? When she needed companionship and help, why didn't you say it then? Now that she's forgotten you, you suddenly come out playing the role of the hurt man in love. What a joke." Mark seemed unable to accept this fact. His face turned pale and he shuddered all over. "What did you say? She forgot me. How is that possible?" Olivia, frustrated and angry, threw the diagnosis slip at his face. "Open your eyes and see for yourself." Mark's hands trembled as he unfolded the diagnosis slip. It detailed my condition. After reading it, he was completely devastated, repeating, "How could this happen? How could this happen? Why didn't Lisa tell me from the beginning?" Mark looked at me with a face full of guilt, wanting to come over and ask for my forgiveness. But I was already resisting his approach, hiding behind Olivia, asking her when I could be discharged and when these two strangers would leave my room. Olivia comforted me like a child. "Don't worry, as soon as you're fully recovered, we'll leave." Jennifer couldn't help but sneer. "Mr. Smith, stop pretending. This looks very childish. Lisa, was she always this good at acting just to divorce you? Such extreme measures." "Ah." Before she could finish speaking, Mark slapped her hard. "Shut up!" His face turned ashen as he pointed to the door. "We don't need you here. Get out!" Mark knelt by my bedside, saying many things I couldn't understand. Finally, he looked defeated, like a broken man. "Olivia, why did she forget me but still remember you? Isn't this just a show you're all putting on?" Olivia laughed coldly. "Do you think too highly of yourself? Do you think you're so important that the whole world needs to put on a show to deceive you? Do you find that amusing?" Mark was completely silent. I didn't like him staying in the room, so Olivia drove him away. But Mark refused to leave, clutching the diagnosis slip tightly, his face pale as he sat in the cold hallway. That evening, Olivia brought me my favorite food. "After dinner, can I come over to your place and play? Is that okay? I remember you said we would play the socializing game, and when it's over, you'll give me all the money, right?" Olivia was taken aback for a moment, then smiled knowingly. "Sure." The doctor said my memory had stopped 6 years ago. Many things that happened in the past 6 years I had selectively forgotten. During dinner, Mark set up my bowl and chopsticks, poured water, and gently reminded me, "Lisa, stop looking at your phone and eat properly." I ignored him entirely, laughing out loud at something on my phone. I showed a post from my social media to Mark, laughing so hard my stomach hurt. "Look at this, it's so funny. This guy bought a villa for his assistant's dog. Ha ha ha." Mark didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes turned red as he stared at me, his brows furrowed. When Olivia told me this story, I realized there are such fools in the world, neglecting his own wife and spending millions on someone else's dog. Olivia asked me what I thought, but it's obvious, isn't it? Even a child could see that the man wants to make his assistant his wife. He doesn't want his original wife anymore. I shook my head in disbelief and put down my phone. Just as I was about to eat properly, someone grabbed my arm tightly. Mark was in tears, crying uncontrollably. "No, Lisa, that person still wants his wife." "Impossible," I said, slamming down my chopsticks, thinking he was wrong. Even a 3-year-old knows that where a man's money goes, his heart follows, right? Even if that man's wife didn't see what happened between them, she must have already guessed that the man has changed his heart. If it were me, I wouldn't want such a man as my husband, even if it killed me. After saying this, I continued to enjoy my meal, but the person beside me was stiff like a stone. The doctor said I had amnesia, that I couldn't remember many things. I often held my head, thinking for a long time, not noticing anything missing in my mind. It still felt like life was the same as before. After dinner, I went to play with Olivia, but unlike before, she now had to work every day and was busier than ever. And that inexplicable man kept coming to see me every now and then. He would often cry with red eyes, calling my name and asking for my forgiveness. Once, I couldn't understand and turned to ask him, "You keep asking for my forgiveness, but why don't you tell me what you did wrong?" Mark was completely stunned. He thought for a long time, then said, "Lisa, my biggest mistake was pushing you away, being blinded by delusions, blind in heart and eyes. Now, I have completely severed ties with Jennifer. I've already taken back that villa. Lisa, I saw your diary and the divorce agreement in the bedside drawer at home. I looked carefully. Besides the divorce, I agree to everything else you want, okay? I don't even want the company anymore. I'll give it to you too. Just please get better quickly. And remember me, okay?" I shook my head. He said too much, and it was all such nonsense. I couldn't remember any of it. Mark still insisted on taking me back from Olivia's house. Lisa is still my wife. We haven't divorced yet, and it's not appropriate for her to live in someone else's home. Olivia shielded me behind her and asked for my opinion, whether I wanted to go with him. I quickly shook my head. "I don't want to. I don't like this man." Mark's face turned ashen. He stared at me blankly, his eyes reddening once more. I disliked him even more. Later, Olivia helped me buy a bigger house, saying that the money for the house came from my ex-husband. He sold the company. He also agreed to divorce me. I asked her why. Did Mark go back to Jennifer, or did he go to the assistant's dog? Olivia chuckled, then her eyes turned red. "He died. He was distracted on the way back and got into a car accident. Before he died, he decided to donate his organs to you to help cure your rare disease." "Lisa, I heard the young assistant was pregnant with his child, but Mark refused to acknowledge it. He said it was just a fling, and you were his only wife. If you knew all this when you were clear-headed, would you choose to forgive him?" I shook my head. In fact, after the surgery, when my body recovered, all those memories came flooding back. I knew that during my period of amnesia, Mark had been trying to make amends and seek my forgiveness after learning the truth. I knew he had sent the pregnant Jennifer to have an abortion and had cut ties with her completely. I also knew he genuinely regretted it. But I wouldn't forgive him, because his regrets and apologies couldn't make up for the pain I had endured.